great place, but we don't know what the letter.
I tell you, I'm going to tell you all about his life story.
That's right.
Okay, he died. This is the life of Sarah. One life she died. Chayei Sarah. Yeah, the life of Sarah was 100 shana v'esrim shana v'shevet shanim. 100 years and 20 years and 7 years. The years of the life of Sarah. So as we begin to read the verse, it seems strange. It started off, this is the life of Sarah, so many years. Then all of a sudden it adds on the years of the life of Sarah. That's exactly what we're talking about. Yeah.
But
I'm going to go interruption. Make sure the lights don't go out again like last week. Now, so this is the problem. It's telling you the life of Sarah. It doesn't tell you one word about her life. And then it says, these are the years of the life of Sarah. Well, I just told you, 127 years. So what's it all about? So then you get into the Rashi. Rashi says 100 years and 20 years and 7 years is to give a whole message about her life. It's not just enumerating the number of years she lived, but by inserting the word years between each phrase, 100 years and 20 years and 7 years, it's making each one a separate entity. The 100 years is an entity, the 20 years is an entity, and the 7 years is an entity. And then the closing phrase, these are the years of the life of Sarah, that closing phrase says that they're all together. So on the one hand, the Torah brought us to separate them into 3 groups, and that's not so simple. Because if you look at Yishmael and Avram and others, the Torah often does that. But that closing phrase, which attempts to bring them back together, shows the Torah intended to separate them here. What's the separation? Rashi says it's to teach you that at 100 years old, she was just as saintly as at 20. And at 20 years old, she was as charming and attractive
and pure.
As it doesn't say pure, it says it's beautiful as at 7. All right. 100 is as free from sin as 20, and 20 is as beautiful as 7. What is that saying in effect? It's saying that these are all years of Sarah, that old Sarah. And you see such people, like the ones that come to my class, that, well, I could say Mary's still 7 years old. I could say Hilda's about 6, 8 years old. Thomas certainly 3, 4 years old. In other words, there are people who can well, we're talking about the ladies this week. So men aren't like this so much, by the way, not as much. You have people who at 80 or 90
גם רמנית אסרוד.
This is Esrod.
באמת.
This is Esrod never grew up. Like the Esrod which retains its fragrance for many years. Anyway, so the concept is that it's not just the passages, as Gail Sheehan's book, based on the research of Professor Levine of the University of Pennsylvania into life stages. They spent many thousands of dollars and man-hours to come up with what Pirkei Avot says. 30 years old is for straying, 40 years old for understanding, 50 years old for counseling, 60 is the beginning of old age, 80 years strong, 90 is something else. So I quoted that when I heard the man speak. He said, yeah, that's it. This was a huge research which resulted in the popular book passages. Now the image you get from those statements is there's a certain time to be a child, a certain time to be a mother, a certain time to be a grandmother. It's only partially true. Each of those things has value in itself, and there should be some element of each age at every age. In other words, there should be a 3-year-old in you yet. You shouldn't just be an older person. There's a bit of the child in you. The child in you should not be killed. The child is still alive. Where do we have the opposite notion? That a child who's really a sensitive and beautiful child will also have a little old man inside of the child. By Yosef. What is Yosef called? Why does Yaakov love him so much? Because he's what? What is Joseph to Jacob, according to the Torah?
Diseases of age.
The child
Of his
of
old
his
age.
old age. Ben
Ben
Zekulim.
Zekulim.
Who is Yaakov's little boy?
Binyamin.
Right, it's not Yosef. Yet the Torah says he loves Yosef. Ki Ben Zekulim hulo. He's a child of his old age. So the
Because
rabbis.
Benjamin died in Rachel's childbirth. And
Yeah,
she died bearing
that,
him.
that may have given him
So
some
that may
feeling.
have,
Yes, some on the contrary, it would make more closeness, more rachmanos on the little orphan. But they explain it differently. Yaakov's life was spent in what? The life that we read about mostly. He started out as a yeshiva boy, a homebody yeshiva boy, who was in the two great Jewish tents, Ma'ato Alecha Yaakov, the tents of Torah and the tents of family. But Rivka won out over Yitzchak that Yaakov should leave the yeshiva, and founded the ideal of Torah im derech eretz, that his Torah should be accompanied by worldliness. And the next 20 years or so, what did Yaakov spend doing? Working.
Yeah.
Working hard, day and night, he tells Mama. In the cold and the frost and the dark and night, Yaakov was building up his fortune, building up his family. So there couldn't have been too many hours for learning, as it's described. So Yaakov is the businessman. Then when he makes a little money in Long Island or San Francisco or London, he decides it's time to take that money and go back to Israel and sit and learn. The family business will now be run by his youngsters. And they're out there with the sheep running all over the place, raising sheep, starting up a American hamburger stand or whatever they're doing in Israel. Yaakov stays home and learns. But one child stays home, Yosef. Because Yosef is Ben Zekulim. Only Yosef is fit company for an old man. Only Yosef has the wisdom of the old. Only Yosef can share Torah learning with his father. So there's the case of the young man who's really an old man. So I would say the message in Rashi is a very simple one. That while there is such a thing as age-appropriate behavior, someone once told me there's no such thing as an elderly hippie. It just doesn't work somehow. It works when you're around 15, 20, 25, maybe 30. After that, it begins to seem a little ridiculous, innately ridiculous, to take life so lightly and not seriously. However, even though there's age-appropriate behavior and there are characteristics for each age, at the same time, all that existed in you before or all that will exist in you after should be there too, playing a role. There's the major actor and the minor actors. So that's how Rashi interprets Sarah. Sarah was a little girl when she was 100 years old. And Sarah retained her beauty in all ages. As we see, great kings tried to take her. At what age? She was 65 when she was taken by Pharaoh. And when she was taken by Avimelech, she's about 90 years old. Right? Now, both Pharaoh and Avimelech could have had all the nubile 15-year-olds they wanted. Right? Where do you see proof of that this week?
In the Parsha.
Maybe.
No.
No?
In the Haftorah.
Of course. In the Haftorah, King David,
Oh, Abishai.
Abishai, a young woman is brought king in those times to take whoever he wanted. So if they wanted Sarah, Marlena Dietrich at 65 or 90 years old, this is a sign that indeed she had an extraordinary beauty. Extraordinary, if the king wanted her at that age. Right? Now, so Rashi says the Torah is telling you her life. These are the lives of Sarah. But it's not telling you openly, it's doing it through hints. So now we have a hint that she was an extraordinarily beautiful woman her whole life, and an extraordinarily righteous woman her whole life. What else do we know about Sarah? And that she was so great. Where do we
She
know
was
this?
in the Nevuah.
How do you know that?
High converts with a
How do you know that? Oh wait, we got both things. You two said she's a prophetess, and you said she made converts. How do you know Sarah made converts? From the text, of course.
Abraham met her herself before she was Sarah, when she was Sarai.
How do you know it?
It was written.
Where?
In the text.
In the commentary,
The souls David.
Ah, Ruth's got it.
David.
So Abraham, last week's
Oh, took a long.
Abraham left Haran, heading on the Liah to Eretz Yisrael.
With the converts.
God promised him everything. Of course, when he got here, there was famine and war, but he was all enthused on the Liah, and he took along with him Sarah, his wife, and Lot, his brother's son, And the souls which he made? No. The souls which they made in Haran. So we see there a very tiny but absolutely clear hint in the Torah for which the rabbis hand down at length in the oral tradition. That Abraham had a share in this, he converted the men, and Sarah worked on the women to bring them close to God and morality. However, I noted last week something new which I had never observed in previous years and which I didn't see in any of the books. But once I noted it makes such sense. There were 3 people doing the work. Lot too. It says, Abraham took Sarah and Lot and the souls which they made.
Yeah.
So the simple grammatical structure would indicate that Lot was his assistant, which explains why he takes along Lot. Some criticize him, because God said, leave your father's house. They took along Lot, who was part of his father's house. And we read this week, after Lot separated from him, God appeared to him. There's different opinions whether it was a good thing or a bad thing that he separated from Lot. But anyway, I would say it's quite clear that Lot was Abraham's assistant. He was the assistant rabbi who converted all the souls. Later, Lot took a turn for the worst. But in the beginning, he was a fine, upstanding person. They made him the Rabbi Emeritus of Las Vegas. Nah. So Sarah, we now see as someone who's sharing Avram's life work to bring mankind back to Eden, back to God and themselves. The function which will eventually be that of the Jewish people among the nations, a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Now someone mentioned prophecy. Where do you see she's a prophet? All right.
She's a prophet.
Well,
Last week
actually,
also.
there's one thing that wouldn't came up with Islam. If she were truly a prophetess, she would have known that Yitzhak was not slain when he was taken for the
Well,
Akedah.
that already, we'll skip that for the moment, because who says she did though? That's a medrash. But it's nowhere clear in the text that the Akedah had any effects on her. She's not mentioned with
That's
it.
right.
The fact that her death is stated right after the Akedah leads to a reasonable conclusion that there was some causal effect. But maybe not. Maybe not. It could have been 10, 20 years later. Maybe just nothing happened in those years that the Torah would bother to talk about. Nothing of consequence. Not so simple. But where do you see she's a prophet? And a greater prophet than Abraham.
But she wants Yitzchak to be the one who carries the seed forward.
Right. She wants to do what? Throw out Hagar. Throw out Ishmael. Abraham, the great prophet, the patriarch Abraham, says no. He doesn't want to do it.
It's his child.
It's his child, and he loves Ishmael, and he thinks his future will be in Ishmael. God says everything that Sarah says, listen to her voice. Which Rashi brings. From here we see a reasonable conclusion that she's a greater prophetess than Avram is a prophet, because she could see the consequences of everything better than he could. Of course, I pointed out that the opposite message comes before that, where Avram is told about the child being born before her, and he doesn't hand it over to her. And where God says to Avram, Sarah's not acting right, and he gives it to Avram to correct her. That would imply the opposite relationship. So I answer that by the Rambam, who says all prophecy only comes when you've developed yourself as a mensch. You don't get into God and transcendence until you've developed yourself down on this earth in every way. And as long as she could not have children and had subsequent sadness and so forth from that, she was not in a state to get prophecy, and Abraham was her guide. But once she had the child, then I would say she becomes the greater prophetess than Abraham is a prophet. Okay, so now we already have a picture. The whole picture the rabbis spelled out is hinted at in the Torah, but only through little hints. So
They mentioned of between Isaac being born.
yes, she's not mentioned
She
openly,
died.
except by Hagar. Except by Hagar,
Right.
setting Hagar away. So she's a prophetess, she's a missionary, and this drasha of Rashi indicates that we know elsewhere she's very beautiful, and we also know about Sarah that she's a great righteous woman. Those are the learnings we have. All right? Now, I could say, how wonderful. The Torah praises Sarah that she is so righteous. And the Torah praises Sarah that she is so beautiful. Is that reasonable to praise someone for being beautiful? It's physically here, yeah. Pharaoh wasn't the sort that was looking for a spiritual woman. So it's physical. Is it reasonable to praise her for that?
And what for Pirkei Avot?
Is it reasonable to praise her? Yes. I would say no. Why would you say yes?
Well, the Torah does it elsewhere, objective.
Yes, it's not praising or describing. You see, Rashi says to tell you, it could be as Mel says, that maybe the Torah is only describing. Perhaps the Torah, this just occurred to me, is just describing her beauty and saying she remained eternally beautiful. Still, in summing up her life, this is like God's secret eulogy. Why mention it? Because she didn't do it. You're born beautiful or homely. You got no say in the matter. You can improve yourself a little. You can do some things. You can wear nice clothes, do your hair nicely. But basically, appearance is a matter of two factors which are beyond your control. How you're born and what happened to be the standards of society at the time you were born. If you are a toothpick figure, you might have done very well in some contemporary eras in America. If you're a toothpick figure, you have been rejected in ancient Greek and Roman cultures, which prized women with a bit of flesh and so forth. Yes?
It also explains the fear of others. I think there's one thing that just gives you a picture, that same description of brother, being beautiful, and there's a reason behind it because of the effect that it has on others, not necessarily on each of the women.
I hear you. That's why, as Mel said, the Torah will describe it because it's a significant factor in the things that happen. That's fine. But I would a little bit object to it in this drush, because this drush is when she's dead already, and at this point the Torah is summing up her good points, or hinting at them. And therefore I don't see the purpose here to refer to, especially since it's been referred to several times when the king took her. Now I know you're a beautiful woman. Yes?
But it is possible that they mention that she's beautiful, not just outside, also on the inside.
Yeah, but that's apparently not what's talked about here.
Yaakov, you know, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, there is one scroll called the Lamech scroll. It's written in Aramaic. And there is a poem ascribed to Abraham, writing about the beauty of Sarah's hair and her beautiful hands. It's a very, very beautiful poem. You can see it in the Hechal HaSefer, you know.
Very interesting. The rabbinical notion is the opposite. When they're going to Egypt, he sees everybody like looking at her eagerly. Oh, now I know you're pretty. Like, he never paid attention to such things. Abraham is so holy. What's the difference? It's her soul. Abraham cares about her hands or her hair. Now I know you're pretty. Only he sees the others looking at her. I don't like that drush anyway, so I'll accept what you said.
It's part of the Dead Sea Scroll.
Very interesting. Okay, so
But it's also possible that it's not
yes, you know, but why would the Torah, Rashi, praise her for retaining her beauty, as beautiful and 20 as it said? I would say a very simple thing. In my opinion, I brought in Yosef before for the little old man. I'll bring in Yosef again. Somehow I keep tying Yosef into this. Pharaoh has trouble understanding his dreams. They're not such hard dreams. I mean, about something coming out of the Nile, good and turning bad. If you gave a bunch of high school kids this dream to interpret, probably somebody come up with the right answer. And none of the wise men of Egypt could do it. And what did the commentary say was the problem? Two dreams. None of them could explain why you have the same thing coming up twice. The ears of corn and the cattle. And then Joseph explains why two times, because it's buried down there, okay? So, what did Joseph say about the two dreams?
God will give you interpretation.
They're one. The two dreams is apparently that's the focus on this problem of two dreams. Chalom echad. It's one dream that Pharaoh has dreamt, and the repetition is indicated will come soon. So here too, I would say it's one drasha that Rashi has given. Not two drashas. That we praise her for being as righteous at 100 as at 20. And that we praise her for being as beautiful at 20 as at 7. No, it's one drasha. We praise her for being as righteous at 100 as at 20, even though she was as beautiful at 20 as at 7. And let me explain. Some people are lucky, maybe unlucky, that they're born beautiful in terms of the culture of their times. What does a beautiful woman have to do to have people like her and get married?
Sex appeal.
She's got it. So what does she have to do?
To try to keep it.
All right, keep it, but what does she
She has
really
to
have to
expose
do?
herself to society.
All right, people will see what happens. What does she have to do? What does a beautiful woman have to do to get married?
She's actually a human being who has just a sex kind.
Actually,
Make
she
sure
really
that
doesn't
you
have to do
remain modest
anything.
and not vain.
She doesn't have to do anything because there's always men around and we're very happy to own this beautiful
She has to maintain
creature.
her
As
beauty.
long as she's a reasonably decent person, she'll be all right.
She has to maintain her beauty.
What? Yeah, all right, she should become, but she really doesn't have to do a darn thing. What does a homely woman have to do?
Work very hard and improve her mentality.
Improve her mind, improve her neshama. All right, she's not so pretty, but she's such a beautiful soul. All right, she's not so pretty, and she has such a keen, sharp mind. So if you see someone, and they're a great scholar, or tzaddikus, or something like that, so, all right, it's wonderful, they've done good, but basically, look, a person has to be something, to have self-respect, and to be liked by others. When you see a beautiful woman, who's also a tzaddikus, then you know it's lishma, it's absolutely sincere. She doesn't have to do all this. If she's doing it, it's because she really wants to do it. The others also want to do it, but some unconscious mechanism may be at work. So I would say Rashi's drasha is one, that she was a tzaddikus, and 100 like at 20, even though at 20 she was as beautiful as at 7, despite her great beauty, and a temptation just to leave things alone and become the queen of Egypt, or become the queen of the Philistines. Abraham's great mission and dream wasn't going to happen in their lifetime. As soon as he made Aliyah, there was a famine they had to leave. There was a war he had to risk his life in. Lot, his most devoted disciple, left him to become the Reform Rabbi Emeritus in Las Vegas. So Abraham's mission is a long, slow one, as God showed him in the visions. And the Rebbe didn't say, you're going to get the land, but your seed will inherit the land. And Sarah is a beautiful woman who just left this whole scene, as many a modern woman might, and so I'm going to have an easy, luxurious life. But she didn't. Because despite her being so beautiful, she was something. Now, we get the same drasha later, where Abraham dies. Abraham is 100 years, and 70 years, and 5 years. And Rashi brings a similar drasha. He was as strong and powerful at 100 as at 70. Given the life cycle, that would mean like at 28, because he lived to 175, proportionally. And he was, as righteous then as at 5 or something like that. It's the same idea when a man is good and kind and pleasant and cooperative. It can be because he's really not a man, he's not strong. So because he's afraid of people, he wants them to like them, like him. So therefore he always acts so nice and pleasant. But maybe deep down beneath the Casper milk toast surface, this is the most aggressive, angry man in the world. However, when a man is strong, like these beautiful messages in the good Western movies that they show on television, this strong tzaddik, when he's strong and powerful and fears no one, and still he's kind to everyone, that's a sign again that that's a truly kind and good man, because he's not doing it out of fear. And so we say every Motzei Shabbat in this synagogue, Yeshua, many synagogues don't say it, all the long prayers at the end of Shabbat. Rabbi Yochanan said, in every place where you find God's strength, His power, there you find His humility. What's God's humility mean? His concern with those least powerful, with most hopeless. God, the strong, the mighty, the powerful, who worries about the orphan and the widow and so forth. And it's shown from the Torah, and it's shown from the prophets, and it's shown from the holy writings. Torah, Nevi'im, and Kesuvim. So the same notion we have, I would say in Rashi, that when a person is perfect again, as I mentioned by Sarah's prophecy, when a person is perfect and strong and healthy and well and pretty, everything they should have in this world, then there's a truly extra dimension to their piety and goodness and self-development, because it's done lishma, not because of a psychological need. Okay? So that's the first word in this parsha. So Sarah died in Kiryat Arba, which is Sarah, and Avram came to mourn her and to weep for her. Is there anything unusual about that verse?
Isaac already came from Beersheba.
Why should he come from Beersheba?
I don't understand it.
That's where they lived. They didn't live in Hebron. They lived in Beersheba. They had left the Hebron area.
Why was she going her?
And that's where a very special well was done.
Yes, well,
That
that
water is a,
yeah, we spoke of Sarah Kota, perhaps to make the public eulogy that's quietly cry on the side. We have a little base a little chaf, livkota, so that if you read straight through quickly, you would read it to mourn Sarah and her daughter. There's a tradition.
What's the little cow?
The little kaf is that you also can read it instead of crying for her, for her daughter, because there is a tradition that they had a daughter who apparently was so attached to her mother that when her mother died, she died. We have that phenomenon often with husbands and wives, where sometimes they're very, very close and interdependent. One passes away, and just a little bit later you see the other person. So the notion here would be that their daughter was so close to Sarah that as Sarah died, she died. We'll get to this daughter in a minute. It's one of the most fascinating things in the Parsha.
I think that's called
Bat Kol. That's one version. That's one opinion as their name. Okay, but what's unusual? They lived in Beersheba now. Chevron's where they started out when they came back with Lot from Mitzrayim. But then after the whole scandal of Sodom and Gomorrah, Abraham felt he just wanted to get out. And he felt ashamed because Abraham felt he could save the whole world. Here his own nephew was shamed everything. So he went down south to the Beersheba area. That's where they lived apparently. There's all kinds of opinions on this, where they lived, where they traveled, but I'll give you what seems to be the simplest. They lived in Beersheba, and yet Sarah died in Hebron. Why?
Just a minute. Can you give us the dates? Because Yitzhak was 37 at the time of the Akedah.
That's clear. That's not clear. That's one opinion. That's the Talmudic opinion. One Talmudic opinion.
No. What age was Sarah when the Akedah?
Yeah, depends on what age Yitzchak was. There's two opinions in the Talmud, as long as you ask. Yeah, it's like this. This is as long as you said it. Yeah, it could be. Could be. And it's last week's Seder, but we'll just review it. There's two opinions in the Talmud. One that little Yitzchak is 5 years old, and one that he's 37 years old. The Ibn Ezra brings the two Talmudic opinions, and guess what the Ibn Ezra says?
20.
I think they're wrong. He brings the Talmud and says, I think it's wrong. Because if he's 5 years old, he couldn't carry enough wood to burn himself. It says he carried the wood after Yishmael and Elazar were left back there to stay with the material world while they go to the transcendental world. Shvula found Poi Machamor with the donkey, the Chumriut, the material world. I and the lad will go to Ko, which is 25 Hanukkah, which symbolizes the world beyond this world. Ko, Amar Hashem, and so forth. Okay? So,
I don't get that point about.
all right.
Please make it clear.
Shabu, Avram says to his two lads, who he has to take, because the Jews never going to make it to Mount Moriah without the non-Jew and the non-religious Jew. The religious Jews alone will not bring salvation from the land of Israel. So he takes along Elazar and Yishmael. But when he gets to a certain point in his experience where he transcends this world, he knows they're not ready for that yet. Their salvation says. Yes, the two lads. Now, that's how they're identified. Yeah, no, vis-a-vis Abraham. You know, like, you have the old English colonists sitting there in Malaysia, and he addresses the 16-year-old man, boy, bring me a Israel, all right? Now, so he takes the two lads, and he tells them at a certain point, Shavu lachem po ima chamor, stay here with the donkey, and chamor is like chomer, material, chumriut, the material world. V'ani v'anar, I and Yitzchak will go on Ko. And Ko is a symbol for the transcendental world, the miraculous world. Its numerical equivalent is 25, which is Hanukkah, which is the transcending of normal reality. And God often introduces his word through Isaiah and so forth. Ko, Amar Hashem. So Ko has many mystical transcendental connotations. Okay, onward. So the problem is, what is Sarah doing dying in Hebron when they lived in Beersheba? So they answer, I'm sorry, I didn't finish your question. So the Talmud says that he was either 37 or 5. The Ibn Ezra says if he was 5, he couldn't carry the wood. And if he's 37, why praise Yitzchak? Abraham, praise Yitzchak. 37-year-old man doesn't do what his father tells him. He's the one that should be praised for doing the Akedah. He's the one who's going to die. That's the Ibn Ezra's questions. So the Ibn Ezra concludes, like Lillian, whose picture I took for my Parsha sheet, that he was a young boy, 13, 15, a young lad, a teenager, and therefore, as a young lad, he could carry the wood, but he would still listen to his father, at least in those days. So therefore, the one who's praised is Abraham, not Yitzchak. Now, the Ibn Ezra says like this: if the rabbis would tell me that what they got is from God, from Sinai, I have to accept it, even though it doesn't make sense to me. But if they don't say that, if it's their own reason, I can argue with the reason of a Talmudic rabbi. Because their reason is not authoritative, only the laws as accepted by the Jewish people. But speculation, ideas, it's not authoritative. Well, this is going to be relevant when we come to their opinions about women a little later. All right. One thing to bear in mind, that whatever opinions the rabbis have about women, while you should look at them very carefully, these are brilliant people. If these particular opinions are a result of their own conclusions from their times and circumstances, and not from the tradition from Sinai, then no one's obligated to agree with them. And the Rambam's son says a similar thing in the introduction to the Yaakov, his introduction to the Agadah. He says anyone who relies on the rabbis of the Talmud for scientific matters is doing a sin, because in logical matters, the Torah says do not recognize faces in judgment. Okay? So if the rabbis tell you to take the excrement of a white dog as the remedy for a certain illness, well, they're smart people, think about it. But on the other hand, it only reflect the medical knowledge of their times. And if your times are much more developed scientifically, it's forbidden to follow them, because God never gave them authority in how to fix your washing machine or how to make a kugel. Even the most extreme Meishalim will not turn to the Talmud to find out how his wife should make a potato kugel, at least if he values having a nice Shabbos. Okay, so anyway, that's the thing about the age of Yitzchak. So who knows? Now, I would, by the way, not agree with the Ibn Ezra, because I would say, well, it could be, first of all, if you see little Arab kids. If a kid's trained right, not like our very spoiled kids, at 5 years old they could schlep plenty, and at 37, if you have a father like Abraham, you remain a perpetual child. Because that's a problem with people with great parents. How do they ever establish their own identity?
To pledge the kingdom.
Yeah. So, all right.
No, there is actually...
Anyway, it's not our story, because it's last week's.
The point is, if he was 5 years old, and she died 32 years after the Akedah.
Yes. He was 37 when she died, that's clear.
He was 37.
Because she was 127, he was born when she was 90. That's clear. He was 37 when she died, but how old he was at the age, that is not clear.
But then, later on in the parasha, he's happy when he gets married.
Yes. Which is much later. Which is much later.
Much later?
Well, at least 3 years. 3 years. 3 years.
Why
He gets married as much as
That's
Right.
Why did Sarah wait so long to find a wife?
I'm sorry?
Sarah didn't,
Sure,
Sarah was already dead.
Abraham takes another wife. You can get another wife, but you can never get another mother. Listen, I once knew a fellow, a simple British plumber in Boston, whose wife and mother-in-law were fighting all the time. And he finally decided to get rid of the wife. What was his logic? You can always get another wife, but you can never get another wife.
Do you think he was terribly a sort of the bond?
Yet the Talmud says a husband doesn't die except for his wife, and his wife but for the husband. But to link a husband and wife, they shall be one flesh, is very
Nice
close.
bond.
There's different opinions, maybe. Okay, onward. You
I
know,
have a sense as well.
yeah, now. No, it's censored, just put away in the closet now. Back to this. So why does she die at Hebron? So the best theory I heard, yeah.
I would say on the practical plane, because in the summer, when they got hot in Beersheba, they went to Hebron. There was more grass after the sheep.
So you're saying that Hebron was the Catskills.
Was she was there for the summer?
If you say Abraham was busy doing the Akedah while this is happening, and I'll have on my Parsha sheet a lot of this. I can't do it all this year. If you say that, that's all right, that he gave the sheep died. Unfortunately, came up to the Catskills. Yeah, that's an interesting theory that they kept two homes because of climate.
When they were making
Yeah, I would have a hunch Avram would prefer to hang around Beersheba because it's hot there and the travelers would really need sustenance. In the heat of the day, he goes out to the door of the tent. So maybe she goes up there to the cats. It's an interesting possibility.
By the way, it's not in the heat of the day. I had
All right.
it's as the heat of the day. He was hot.
He was hot. Interesting. Kichel Mayom. I think Kichel means when it was hot.
How far of a ride is it, donkey-wise, from Hebron to Beersheba?
Chevron to Beersheba, I would guess.
A long
Day.
It was just
How long did it take Abraham to come to Beersheba?
I don't know. I can say.
Nobody
It's
knows.
about 50 kilometers.
Yeah.
50 kilometers.
Anyway, I'll tell you another theory. Another theory. Of course, all right, now you threw me off balance with that. Let me get my balance back. I would say if that were the thing, it wouldn't say Avram came and mourned her, because we wouldn't care about his coming in. It wouldn't be any significance to it. He would simply mourned her and so forth. The fact that she was in their summer home would be the kind of thing that the Torah would talk about. So I would say there's more to it than that. What there is to it, in my opinion, is that this was a preconceived Zionist plot to get the world's first Zionist plot. What do I mean? Up till now, we don't see any realization of the Zionist dream, which starts in Lech Lecha. God starts Judaism with Zionism. First thing is get out of that rich, prosperous land of Babylonia and go to the river of Canaan, where you can see me and where you will be seen to the whole world and so forth. That's where you're going to make it. Abraham does it, fine. But they don't get any land. They're wandering around here and there, pitching their tents. This is the first recorded purchase of land of the land of Israel by the Jewish people. The cave of Machpelah. And it could be, as you see, they don't really want to sell them the land. They say you take Forest Lawn, take the best cemetery in town, bury her wherever you want. They are interested in having her buried in the regular cemetery. Avram insists on separate burial, which also teaches a lesson as we establish a Jewish state in Israel. It must be according to the unique Jewish spirit, which recognizes life after death, and that soul should be with its own people and not with others. This whole thing of separate burial. Very interesting. But anyway,
Why couldn't he do it in Beersheba? Why couldn't Beersheba?
Because we believe there is an innate holiness to this place. One of the holiest Jewish places in the world, perhaps second to the temple now, is the cave of Machpelah. And our tradition, no. According to our tradition, it's not just because the patriarchs are buried there, therefore it's holy, but the patriarchs are buried there because it is holy. We have all the Midrashim which say who else is buried there besides Adam and Eve, which means there's like a hidden essence of man in its higher state. They say there was a spirit there where he could feel Gan Eden. The Midrashim say the cow ran away. Remember last week when he was trying to slaughter, he ran after the cow. It led him into Machpelah, and there he stands the beautiful aroma of Gan Eden. What is the moral message there? That you try to help feed and influence low-class idolaters. That's the way you get close to God. That's how you do it. Like Moshe coming down from Har Sinai for the golden calf disco, and then asking God for a greater revelation of God afterwards. All right? So the idea apparently is they knew of the sanctity of this site, and it was this site which was most important to get in the hands of the Jewish people. And each place which a Jew bought with witnesses to make sure his descendants would still have it, each of those places are the very places that the Arabs dispute today. Yaakov bought and witnessed Shechem. That's the hotbed of Arab nationalism. And King David with the site of the temple, and Avram with the Marat HaMachpelah. So our traditional notion is there's an innate holiness in this place.
What was the first one you mentioned?
The first one is Shechem, where Yaakov buys the land, where Yosef gets buried later, which is the place, again, where you have maybe the most strongest resistance to the Jewish people.
What you're hinting is that the family she was going to die.
Right.
When she went where she knew she should
Success. She knew they would sell her land off them, and Adam couldn't demand it. The land wasn't his yet. It's an Aliyah product. But with this setup, where she's lying there dead, and he even almost threatened them, do this, and I'll get my dead from before me. The rabbi said, otherwise I won't budge, let her sit here. She has got to be buried in that place. And he identifies the place. I mean, if it's just, to answer something like you were asking about, if he's just looking to find a place to bury her, he doesn't give me a piece of land anywhere. He identifies the piece of land he wants. That itself, again, is a little biblical hint to the whole rabbinic tradition. So,
Who's Ephron in the picture?
Ephron is the guy who happened to have the land. Now, I don't know if there's any more to it than that. Probably there is in the Kabbalah. So he wants to mark Machpelah. Oh, since you mentioned the words Kabbalah, or I mentioned them, let's have a Kabbalistic digression for a moment. He wants the cave of Machpelah. What is Machpelah? We're speculating on. Yes, it's kaful. It's double what? Machpel, hey. It's double hey. One second. It's double hey. 10. Machpelah literally can be translated as the double hey. Now, what significance is there of the double hey? In God's name. Yud, and then comes a hey, then a vav, and then a hey. So the one letter that's doubled in God's name is the hey. Now, the significance of this in Kabbalistic teaching is that hey represents expansion to the full extent that you can expand, at least. Man can't go down, but he can go to both sides and on top. So hey represents expansion beyond which there's no more expansion. The yud and the vav represent potential for expansion. The yud itself can be expanded into a vav. So the masculine expansive principle in the world, the conquest principle, is associated with the yud and the vav, as are the physical shape of his organ. And the hey is associated with female as the shape of her organ, and that which is already expanded and concentrates that on death, something like that. Now, this is the way it works. There's a law on Shabbos that you may not do borer. You may not separate out from a mixture its respective component. That's called borer. Every one of us violates that. Every Shabbos, in a sense. Because what do we do on Shabbos? The karasal of Shabbos oneg, eat, but good. So as we eat on Shabbos, we put food into our mouth and start the process of borer. Got it? Now, we separate the food into its blood, whatever elements, waste, and so forth. Now, it works out something like this. God speaks of your Shabbos as like dung or vomit to me, things like this, peresh. There's expressions like that, your holidays. If one is truly in shape, then when he eats on Shabbos, and that concept of an extra soul on Shabbos, the food, while maybe going through the biological process, but the food itself gets transformed into something which sustains a higher soul, beyond the realms of physical borer. If, however, he's not good, then that very eating on Shabbos can turn into sin, or on Yom Tov. Now, borer is not prohibited on Yom Tov, only on Shabbos. The way on Yom Tov that you elevate the eating experience is to share the joy of Yom Tov with others. There is not a specific mitzvah to invite others to your Shabbat table. Today we do it because we want to spread Shabbos. But assuming you're living in a completely observant community, there is no special mitzvah to share your Shabbos. There is a big mitzvah to share your Yom Tov. There's a special thing to have guests on Yom Tov, not on Shabbos.
Yeah, but there's also not.
Yeah, there's generally a person doesn't have a place. It could be Sunday or it could be Shabbos. If a person doesn't have a place, doesn't have a meal, that's a general mitzvah.
But the validity of the minhag of an oil for Shabbos.
It's where, again, it says, Mr. Tov says, it's plus a circle. Never, you can't buy, everything is closed, it's all on Shabbos. But I'm saying it's not such a big Indian halacha as on Yom Tov. And they say this is because that extra soul on Shabbos elevates the food, and on Yom Tov, the only thing that elevates the food is guests. But on Shabbos, where the extra soul is there, you don't need guests. It's all kinds of mystical notions. Anyway, so getting a little bit more into it, it says the hay, the second hay, beyond the realm of ultimate expansion, is that which only comes from a source out of this world. Vav and Yud are parts of God's name, aspects of God, which can be expanded within this world. But the Hey is already represents the ultimate possibilities in this world. And the only thing that goes beyond that is the second Hey, which comes down from God, so to speak, from the Shami and Terah, and that comes from a transcendental world. So that's the idea in the mystical tradition of Marat HaMachpelah. The place where the Hey is doubled, where God's presence comes down from a supernal world to add a dimension to human experience that cannot be found anywhere else except possibly the Beit HaMikdash. What I've just given you is from, you know, the Baal HaTanya. The founder of Chabad wrote a mystical book on Parashat Hashavua, which I picked up while I was waiting for the slow chazan this morning at davening, and it's called Torah Or. And that's the first teaching he has on this parsha. Anyway, but the way I'm placing it is this is a scheme preconceived by Avram and Sarah. When one of them would die, he would head towards Hebron, and they would try to get that site, which was the beginning of holy Zionism, religious Zionism, in the land of Israel. Then what does he say to them? Now here's the funny part of the Torah. Just say Avram got the cave and he buried her. Why does the Torah, which skips over the first 75 years of Avram's life, is not getting into the mission yet, suddenly go into a whole detail on the haggling over this piece of land with Ephraim, and the witnesses, and the people of the place being involved, and the 400 shekels, the whole thing. Why does the Torah give so much space to this? And the haggling between them. So Rav Soloveitchik, 400 shekels when the shekel was a shekel. Now, when it was shakul, when it weighed something, like carrying weight. Now, Rav Soloveitchik said, this is to show you a very simple message, which Avram himself proclaims in verse 4. What does he say? Avram got up from his dead. It's interesting, the Torah doesn't tell us the eulogy. I'd love to print this eulogy in the next Rabbinical Council of America sermon manual. Avram's eulogy on Sarah. It would sell even better than Rav Soloveitchik's eulogy on the Talmud Rebbetzin. A fantastic thing. The Torah skips it. Instead, the Torah goes into the haggling. So I'm suggesting now, like everything else about Sarah, which is just into that, this is the Torah's last great praise for her, that she felt herself sick and dying. She managed to schlep herself to Hebron in order to achieve this great holy Zionist objective. And that's why the purchase becomes significant. Let me just finish this slide. Okay? So what does Avram say to these people, to the Hittites? Ger v'toshav anochi machem. I am a stranger and a settler with you. Give me the ownership of a kever with you, and I will bury my dead from before me. The rabbi said, otherwise I won't bury her. He made like a protest. This is the only place I will bury her. Right? He says, Ger v'toshav anochi machem. What does that mean? Is the Jew a stranger in the society in which he lives? Is the Jew in America really not an American? Is the Jew in England really not an Englishman? And the Jew in South Africa really not the South African? The answer is no. He's a toshav. Is the Jew a real American, a real Britisher, a real South African? The answer is no, he's not. He's a ger. He's a stranger. And this duality of experience, this paradoxical state of being, characterizes the Jew wherever he is outside of the land of Israel. I am with you. In this case, he was in Israel, but it was under an alien culture and government. So he says, I'm one of you. You know I'm your friend. I helped you when the emperors conquered you with Lod and Sodom. I'm an outstanding citizen. He's a wealthy person who contributes to everything. He teaches everybody. Say, you're a prince of God in our midst. In our midst. Avram doesn't stay in the Kollel. Avram doesn't stay in Borough Park. Avram is in the midst of the general community in which he lives. But at the same time, his heart beats to a different drummer. And Abraham is a stranger with them. Because he has conceptions and aspirations and feelings and life goals which are quite different from theirs. Again, Shavu lachem imachamor, you stay here in this world, we go together. I and the Lord and the lad will go over there, and we shall return to you. Someday we'll all be together. A second revelation, everyone will know about God. Meanwhile, we are the priest who is a certain degree aloof from his congregation in order that he doesn't just become one of them, and he can develop himself so as to inspire and lead them to a higher place. Okay? Ger Toshav Anochi Mochem. Also, in the very realm of life itself, Abraham feels he's a stranger. He's part of this world. Abraham lives. He eats and drinks, maybe goes to a clean movie, takes a trip, does all kinds of things. But at the same time, Abraham knows this world is but a brief way station in between eternities. As the Chafetz Chaim said, I have no furniture because I'm only on a trip. Who takes their furniture along for a trip? But it's so brief. So Abraham is telling them, the reason I'm a stranger and a settler in the midst of you is because I am a stranger and a settler in this very world itself. We have a different attitude toward life
Why
today.
do you use the plural of eternities?
Why did I?
You use the plural eternity.
Because we come from one state of eternity before we're born, and we go to a different one after we die, hopefully having improved ourselves. There's seven heavens. I could use the singular, you're right. It's a way station in the midst of eternity. But I use eternities because I have a hunch that the trip makes a difference. That you're not the same type of eternity, the same experience of eternity after your trip through this world as you were before your trip through this world. Okay, let's get going. We only did a few psukim. And then they have this whole negotiation. Avram knows that when they say take it, they don't mean take it, they mean we want the money. And he knows you're going to have witnesses, you better have zoning board approval. If all the local people don't approve, he can take the money and say, sorry, they wouldn't let me sell it to you. So what's Reb Soloveitchik taking? You see Abraham. All these verses of the Torah show Abraham as Ger Toshav, a man who's savvy, who knows their language, who knows what they mean, who knows how to handle, how to haggle, who knows when you need witnesses.
He has a proper contract with an inventory.
Yeah. So Abraham shows that the religious Jew is not some kind of naive yeshiva bacher, but on the contrary, he's a very savvy person. A prince of God in our midst, they call him. He's both. Okay? Then, we have an interesting expression of Soloveitchik notes. First, it says he purchased the field. When you purchase something, is it yours?
Yes.
Is it really?
Yes, he bought
For
it.
how long?
Freehold. He bought it freehold.
Fine. Let's look.
Hittite.
When he buys the thing, and the negotiations are over, Le'avram Lamikna, in verse number 18, we're at 23:18, the field became a purchase for Abraham. In the eyes of all the people, everyone who was passing through the gate was properly witnessed and said it did. Now, when you buy something, is it yours?
Yes, it is.
For 900 years.
Yes, it is. Freehold in perpetuity.
This is freehold. When you buy a freehold in perpetuity, is it yours?
Yes.
What do you mean it's yours? Yes.
Nothing is yours, everything belongs to Hashem.
49 years.
Yuval, that's only by lands in Israel, which don't have a wall.
It's yours if you occupy it,
Will you?
Nothing is really ours.
All right, that's a different perspective.
How long you have an active interest in it?
Yes.
No, but
Let's say I buy a car.
there you also have to.
Say I buy a house. How long is it really mine?
But if you buy a freehold, it has no
How long?
Always.
As long as I'm alive.
No, but
Could you
you
say
buy-
it's mine longer than that?
Yes.
if you have...
Either to your children.
Okay, how long?
Forever.
You know anyone who's had one on forever? Excuse me. Let's take a country which has been stable. Really stable, like England.
Anyhow, the cave is.
How long has a family held land in England? That's it. And that
I
is
didn't hear it.
800-900 years, is celebrated throughout the world as nothing remarkable. That land's been in one family for 800 years. In other places, if it's been 100 years, it's remarkable. Right? So when I say I own something, taking a perspective beyond your immediate lifetime, it's just a temporary thing to do. It's like a long-term rental. If you're lucky, you may keep it your life and down to your son, to his son, beyond 2-3 generations. It's not likely to be yours because that's a war may come. There may be poverty in the family, sickness.
But you still own the deed. The deed would be somewhere.
Well, the deed would be somewhere, they'd be sold, there'd be a war.
Contract there. We don't have a written contract. We don't know if a written
Yeah, all right, whatever. But the point I'm making is, when you purchase something, it's not really yours. You don't really hold it. You hold it relatively. Now, he then buries Sarah. All right? He buries her. In verse 19, he buried her in the field. And then the Torah says, "Vayakam hasad of Amar asher bo." And then the field and the cave in it rose up. Abraham to Abraham. I already said he bought them. La'achuzas kever, for the grasping of a grave. Me'ed b'nei Chet, from the children of Chet. From Soloveitchik said this word achuzah, what it means to grasp something, is it's beyond normal ownership. It rose up. There was now a transcendental, supernatural connection between Ma'arat HaMachpelah and Abraham because of Sarah's being buried. That sort of set it off, which can never be broken. 4,000 years later, here are his descendants back in this land. It's incredible.
Herzog proposed to put the United Nations. He wrote the Bible at the time when they said that he came here by chance or something. He put the Bible
4,000 years ago. Abraham bought it. So this is because only through Sarah's entering eternity in her life, through this acquisition of the land of Israel, does this land transcend normal human categories and become an eternal possession. This is in the Rav Speaks, Rabbi tells his renditions of Rav Soloveitchik's words. Okay.
And Abraham went back to the Sheva?
Presumably.
Yeah.
Abraham became old. Now we're in chapter 24. Here I'm going to dwell on this verse too, and then we're going to fly. Abraham had become old. He had come through the days, and God blessed Abraham in everything. I'll read it in Hebrew, 24:1. Abraham zaken ba bayamim v'Hashem berachet Abraham bakol. And we go on to read about sending Elazar out to get a wife for Yitzchak. What is the problem with this verse, would you say? And Abraham was old, coming
had
age.
everything already, so how could he put the Bible to
What does it have? We know he had everything.
He had been blessed with everything.
Yes. So what?
But he had that.
We know his life. He had children, he had a nice wife, he had money and power. We know Abraham. So what is this adding when it says Abraham blessed him with everything? It's apparently adding something we don't know about up till now. That's one problem. The other problem is Abraham is old. Of course he's old. We know his age. She died just now. She was 127, he's 137 years old. We know this. So what is this Torah adding, this verse? So, Baba Yamim, it doesn't just say, oh, it's his coming days. Apparently denotes not how old he is, but how aged he is. Sometimes someone, you see, is quite old, but they're really on the go. And then suddenly there's a slowdown, that they've come into their last stage. You get it? So apparently after Sarah died is when Abraham aged, really, even though he'd been old before. And now, what great thing does Abraham do after Sarah died?
He married Keturah.
Is that a great thing? Is that great?
Had sons and daughters on.
No, he made sure that Yitzchak married his own family.
Yeah, he got married off.
To Bethel's daughter.
Yeah, is that a great thing really to achieve? Like he achieved the Akedah, he emigrated, left his family, changed everything, came to Israel, survived Egypt. Abraham did many incredible things. What incredible thing does he do now?
He makes sure that
He
his
married
Incredible. So he finds a wife.
He married off his son
that's-
has descendants.
You also married off a son. It's not such a big thing. What is Abraham?
Because the family goes down.
No, it's a big thing, but it's nothing which everyone else doesn't do too. Abraham has wonderful traits. He does things which no one else ever does. He leaves everything he's brought up and he's alone, or he comes to Israel. He makes the
I know. He completed his 10 deaths.
Huh?
He had completed his 10
He
deaths.
completed. So what great thing does he do now?
So he's achieved what God intended to do.
So what great thing does he do now? Nothing.
Nothing. Isaac takes over.
And Rav Soloveitchik has a simple observation. Once Sarah's gone, there goes Abraham's greatness. That behind every great man sits patiently in the tent a deep and good woman. And once Sarah is gone, Avram lives, he has more children, he gets married, he goes to play Canasta once a week. I'm sure Avram would do that. Avram might play chess while talking about God in between the moves. But Avram leads a normal life, basically. See, his son gets married off, his wife gets buried, that's it. Avram's trials are over. That, by the way, in the Medrash is one interpretation. God blessed Avram with everything. The trial stuff. He's good enough, you're going to just enjoy life a little bit now. That's one interpretation. Rabbi
Trials not to be a Kedar.
Yeah. No more trials. No more real
The trial
tribulation.
did he get the cave? Was it somewhat of a trial? He didn't have it locked up?
Yes, it was very good. It was not such a great achievement. He negotiated well and he got it. But nothing compared to what he has done up till now. In terms of terrible life sacrificing, change, radical change. It's a nuisance that he got over with. Apparently, like in a day, he got it over with.
Who buried Adam and Eve in the Maharam and Kalah?
God, I believe. I would guess that. I don't know.
I'm only guessing.
I don't know. Anyway, why did the Torah say Adam and Eve were buried there? I was just thinking, maybe because it doesn't want the Holy Givers even a harder time. All they need to know, all the Pope needs to know is Adam and Eve is buried there. He'll claim the place for the Vatican. All right. So, Abraham, now, there's another interpretation. Now, listen, did Abraham have everything a man should have?
And a lot of
But he didn't have a daughter.
He didn't have a daughter.
He had
He
Dinah.
did with Keturah. He had 6.
Well, but we're talking before Keturah now.
Abraham had Dinah.
He didn't see
No, Yaakov had Dinah.
Oh, that's right.
Now, so he had Dinah in the sense it was a great-granddaughter, but that's
That's
it.
right.
So, all right, now, so the one thing that we see conspicuously missing from Avram's life is a daughter. And since we just spoke of her being as pretty at 20 as at 7, Marie Chevrolet's song, Thank Heaven for Little Girls, right?
Yeah.
So poor Avram never had the pleasure. Of course, Sarah was as beautiful at 20 as at 7, so through Sarah he had a daughter, which might shed interesting lights on husband-wife being husband-daughter relationships, but all right, that's another story. But Avram never had a little girl to call him daddy. So, in the Medrash Rabbah, Rabbi Yehuda says, Vasham berach et Avram bat kol, that he also gave him a daughter. Remember, there's a hint back there that the daughter died with Sarah. To mourn for Sarah, Ulavita, with the small chaf, the leaf kota. And in the Medrash Rabbah, Rabbi Nehemiah says, what's the real bracha? They never had a daughter. God blessed Avram with everything, and he didn't have a daughter. Look what happened before Yaakov with the daughter. You worry about marrying them off. You worry somebody's going to grab them.
Didn't he have a daughter?
Well, according to Rabbi Yehuda, he did. And according to Rabbi Nehemiah, he didn't. Apparently, we do not have a clear tradition, as on many things,
And why
of this
did
thing.
Abraham die together with the mother?
I tried to guess at that because of extraordinary attachment, which would have fit these whole circumstances, and that she just couldn't live without
The
him.
mom care.
Yeah. Anyway, so there's two versions of it. Then Rav Levi gives the other version that God blessed him with some other things. They had upsets, he didn't lose his money. Even after getting everything, people can lose it. And that his son Yishmael, the Eroispa, the one who instead of the godly life wanted to pinch the tourist in the shoe, Yishmael came back and did tshuva. We have many traditions that Yishmael in the end will do tshuva. Our best hopes is once we shape up, the Arabs will accept us. There's a lot of basis for that. So Avram had a good, pleasant old age, all right? But Rabbi Yehuda said the blessing was he had a daughter. Rabbi Nehemiah said the blessing was he had no daughter. Now, there's a parallel passage in the Talmud. In Baba Basra,
There's an obligation to have one son and one
yes,
daughter.
if you say he almost kept the mitzvahs, so that might raise a problem, except that he tried. That's all you can do. If God doesn't let you have, you know that. And God blessed him, he didn't have. Now, Gemara Baba Basra, 16a, we find the same discussion as in Medrash Rabbah, 59:7, which I just quoted. It says there, Rabbi Yehuda said, God blessed him that he had a daughter. And Rabbi Meir said, God blessed him that he never had a daughter. Did you just hear the change I made from the Medrash to the Gemara?
They were both blessed both times. One he had, one he didn't
That's the
have.
same as the Medrash.
Yeah, but
I made a change.
But they were
Anyone
both
notice it?
blessed.
I'll do it again. In the Medrash Rabbah it says, the Rebbe Yehuda said the blessing was that they had a daughter. The Rebbe Chevy says, no, the blessing was they never had a daughter. And in the Gemara, Baba Basra 16a, it says the Rebbe Yehuda said the blessing was they had a daughter, and Rebbe Meir said the blessing was they never had a daughter. What's the difference between the Medrash and the Gemara? Names. The view, not reverse, the Yehuda in both is the one that said he had a daughter. The one the Medrash Rabbah says, who said that Avram was blessed they never had a daughter, is Rebbe Nehemiah. In the Gemara it says Rebbe Meir. Now what do we know about Rebbe Meir? Rebbe Meir is the one who's married to the egalitarian feminist of the age, maybe the least feminine woman at the times, Bruya. It's very interesting, it's the same Abraham who would speak of, same Rebbe Meir who would speak of the blessing that he never had a daughter. Now the Gemara Sanhedrin 100a, if I recall, goes into this whole question if it's good or bad to have a daughter. Rebbe Gamliel, I think it was, or his son had a daughter, and he was consoled by the rabbis. Some rabbis said to him, look, the world needs women just as much as men, because without the women, the world won't go on.
There would be no.
And then another rabbi sticks in his 2 cents, and he says, well, the world needs garbage collectors, so the world needs doctors, but I'd rather myself were a doctor. Okay, so you see here different opinions. Now, would you say that these various rabbis who say he was blessed never having a daughter, and the rabbis who say that, well, the world needs garbage collectors and the world needs doctors, would you say these were misogynist people who were anti-feminine? You wouldn't.
Yeah, of course.
You would say yes.
Of course.
Now, then the question comes, should we follow them? Maybe they're right. So then I bring in that view I mentioned before Mrs. Combs who says no. All right? On behalf of your daughters, I thank you. Now,
I think for a mother, there is nothing nicer than to have a daughter. Nothing, because the son gets married.
yeah, and for a father, it's not so bad either.
Sometimes the daughter-in-law becomes a daughter, like
Yeah.
mine.
Yeah. All right. Now, I would suggest to you 2 things. Even if these particular rabbis, on close examination, turn out to have a low opinion of women, from the thing I pointed out before, that may not bind you in any way to agree with them. Because this is opinions again, not laws. It's simply opinions, not laws. Like, for example, the Sephardic community has a very strong sense of that. Pray that they have a male child. A male, you have no idea. And it's taken from the Arabs, maybe the Arabs took it from them. But the greatness on having a boy, I mean, the extremes in China.
First of all, the boy carries through the family name.
Yeah.
And it's like, we're not very worried about the vulnerability of God.
Ah, that's what I'm about. That's what I'm about. Anyway, China, a primitive civilization like China, as opposed to Judaism, used to drown little girls, leave alone by their feet.
Yeah.
Now, so you could simply say, yes, these rabbis were, given all their background and circumstances and what they saw of women in their times, had a low opinion of women. After all, women were only educated recently. But that does not bind us to share the views. We can at least pick the view of Rebbe Yehuda, who says a blessing is when you have a daughter. Or I would say something like you were going to say. It's not that they're anti-feminist. They don't say, neither Rebbe Yehuda nor Rebbe Nehemiah, neither one says that a man is blessed if he doesn't have a daughter. They say that Abraham, they say that Abraham was blessed by not having a daughter. And it's very simple, really. If you look in his times, even his wife, he could not protect. People would grab her and kill him. This is the age when Lot wanted to just give his daughters to those men properly, assuming that sooner or later it's going to happen anyway. The Pelega should be given even later. A woman is just taken and used by the people they own by Jews.
But in the first parasha, we learned that God made Eve because it's not good for man to live alone.
Right? And as the Abarbanel says, in his image, B'Tselem Elokim bara oto, in the image of God he created him, only the male. B'Tselem Zachar Lekeva bara oto. Male and female, for reproduction, he created them. Okay, that's another story. We did that back in Bereshit, what the meaning of that one is. But let's just concentrate on this one. Concentrating on this one, I would say very simply, given the conditions that we see in the Bible very explicitly, it was impossible to bring up a daughter properly in that time. What happened to Dinah could happen to anybody. To Dinah could happen to anybody. And therefore, given that circumstance, it was a blessing never to have a child, rather than to have a beautiful little girl sent to Beis Yaakov, wonderful, and some drunken shagets will grab her. Abraham's life would be wrecked. So for Abraham, God blessed Abraham and everything, that in his time, he didn't have a daughter. That does not mean it's not a blessing for us to have daughters in a relatively civilized age, where you can raise a daughter beautifully. Got it? Very simple. So there is not necessarily an anti-feminist position.
And he
And the
needed
Gemara,
somebody's daughter for his son.
yes, but thank God he didn't have that strain and worry. And the Gemara in Sanhedrin 100a, if I recall, spells it out. A girl is just trouble. Why? Not because she's bad, but because the man's going to constantly be worried that she'll get in trouble, or someone will do something to her, or her husband will throw her out, or she'll get divorced. Women at that time were so helpless and vulnerable that you could not have a comfortable, worry-free existence if you happen to have a daughter. Anyway, I thought that was interesting to bring in. Now, which commentary, who normally quotes all these interesting midrashim, is likely not to quote this one that I just mentioned?
Ramban.
No. Which commentary, like brings on Rashi? What Rashi have?
Three daughters, but Martha's sons-in-law, wonderful grandson.
So Rashi is the one who would least like this idea of a curse when you have a daughter, because Rashi had three wonderful daughters
And
tremendous son-in-laws who became Balitosphus and so forth, great people. So it's interesting that Rashi doesn't quote this drasha, and apparently I didn't see any source quote. He makes up his own drasha instead. Rashi says, "Vasham berach et Avram bakol." Bakol is a hint, a remez, that Avram's chief bracha was having a son. He had said before God, "What's it worth all that you give me if I don't have a son?" So he gave him a son. What son? How do you say son?
Ben.
What's the numerical
What's the
value?
gematria?
What's the gematria of Ben?
Paul and Ben have the same gematria.
Ben is 52. Bez is 2. Nun is 50. God blessed Avram Bakol, 2, 20, and 30, the same 52. There's a hint that his real blessing was the son. All right? And then he goes about finding Mashiach. Like, I think Rashi took his own drasha, I think, instead of taking the more interesting drasha of the Medrash and Gemara, simply because another drasha about having a daughter doesn't really fit into context here. Sarah died, and Avram worried about having a wife for Yitzchak. So why all of a sudden interject that God had given him a daughter, hadn't given him a daughter? All right? It doesn't seem too relevant. Whereas Rashi's drasha seems relevant, but a little not peshat. I would suggest a third interpretation. Very simple one. There's something strange about this story about sending Elazar out to find a wife for Yitzchak. What's strange about it?
Well, they waited a long time to find one for him.
All right. Maybe the mourning for his mother really made it imperative. Yeah.
The retelling of the story twice.
Yes. But what's basically difficult about the story?
Because Yitzchak from the Akedah was this traumatic experience, it seems that's the reason that he couldn't find himself.
First of all, why can't Yitzchak go out and pick his own wife?
Biblically, that's not the tradition. The parents finding
Well,
the wife.
Maybe we see by Yaakov's sons apparently found their own wives. Yaakov found his own wife. Esau found his own wife. Avram found his own wife, apparently.
But Isaac wasn't allowed to leave, and he couldn't get married.
So Isaac wasn't allowed to leave Canaan. He had to be this perfect, unspoiled, deep, holy person, rather than missionary Avram going all over the place. Avram couldn't leave Canaan to go for his own bride. So therefore, who should go?
It's true.
Who should go? Avram should go and pick a wife for his son. He doesn't trust his servant to take over his mission. He says, God, what do you give me? What's its worth? Eliezer's going to take over. Apparently Eliezer isn't so fit. Somebody describes him as the Jew who isn't quite there in Kedusha, as opposed to Yishmael, the non-Jew. So Eliezer isn't quite fit. So why send him on such an important mission? You hear? So I would say beautifully, this verse supplies the answer. Before we start the story, it says, Avram Zaken Baba Yamin. Avram was in no shape to go. Yitzchak couldn't go, and Avram was in no shape to go. So don't send anybody. Why rely on Eliezer? Vashem berach et Avram bakol. Avram saw that everything he did, God blessed. So he knew he had to find a wife for her. The best he could do was send Eliezer, and God will bless. Very simply. So I would say that's a way of explaining it without the mysterious gematria of Rashi, without the seemingly out of context explanation of the Gemara, about the elusive reference to a bat. But very, very simply, it's explaining why this strange story that the servant is sent out to find a wife for Yitzchak. Then he sends them out, and so forth. All the things the servant later says, that my master is so great with God and all, Avram never says to him, apparently. There are interesting studies in the Chama Leibowitz about the comparison between what Abraham told him, what he told Rivka, and what he later retold to her family. There's like 3 versions of the story here, but we'll skip all that for the moment. You can read a lot about it very nicely in the Chama Leibowitz. And now again, we have a funny thing. So he comes there, and he devises a test. And the rabbis wonder whether he did wrong. You're not supposed to make magic omens like a black cat crosses my path, and I know something. You don't do things like that. Jews don't do that. That's superstition. So what? If the girl will give water to my camel and me, it's a sign. You're not supposed to make signs. So the answer, of course, is, I don't hear the question so much, is this is not a magical sign. It's a character test. If she's a real kind girl, we see Abraham's mission to bring the world back to God in Eden. The first trait, they're all little idol worshippers to this day. It doesn't matter, we'll teach them. But the main thing is they have to be nice and good people. And Lot fails in his mission to convert Sodom, which is his conscious intent, in my opinion, is Avram's assistant. He's going to do his own Baal Tshuva scene, because he takes wicked people, not just people with wicked ideas, but wicked people to work on. It doesn't work. So the main test is little Rivka, who's to be Yitzchak's wife and carry on the mission, must be a very kind person. It's a character test. And again, she passes the test with flying colors. She does more than she has to do by normal hospitality. And again, we have a strange phrase in verse 16, 24:16, Va'anara tovat mareh ma'od. And she was a real beautiful-looking woman. Tovat mareh ma'od. Miss Haran of back then. Not only was she a virgin, but she never even went to a B'nai Brit dance. V'ish lo yada'a, no man ever touched her.
They think she was rich.
What was she doing giving water to strange men?
Well, I would say very simply.
Eliezer sees Abraham in her.
If she was 3, how could she ask him to give this cattle water too?
Yes, he's Abraham.
She had a responsibility.
I don't. First, we do a little better with a girl at 3 with a bunch of sheep. Again, we pamper our children, literally and figuratively. They're spoiled. Little kids can do an awful lot more than you think. Okay? B, we don't know the issues at that time. C, your question, how did she give water to a stranger? Because that's what you do. They give water. She was alone with them. There's a public place here. There's people all around.
Because while she was younger than...
No, I would say very simply. First of all, she wasn't Jewish at this point. Now, anyway, back to this scene. So he makes the test and she gives the water. And the Torah notes something very strange in verse 16. That, she was very beautiful. Why God doesn't tell us beautiful? The whole thing is this character test. She should be a kind woman. So again, this fits the idea I gave at the beginning of the class, like by Sarah, that you could say she's kind because she's afraid. And like you said, maybe the stranger's going to beat her up or something. You better do what he wants. No, this little girl was beautiful. She didn't have to do any work, maybe even. Everybody loves beautiful little girls. But she was basically a truly kind and deep person. So I would say that same message is found here, where it stresses Rivka's beauty. By the way, that idea of a 7-year-old being the most beautiful age, 20, all right, she's an old lady already. But at 20, she looked like 7. Wow. Shows a far more refined concept of beauty. Not just for the sensuality, because sexually she's not developed at 7, but the idea of the feminine mystique, the beautiful feminine component of a soul, is there by a little 7-year-old. Because she's not restrained yet. She doesn't have to watch out so much for evil intentions and to be on her guard and be more sophisticated. She can just flow with the playful delight of a little girl. And psychologically, this sometimes can lead to some problems where, in fact, the father has a tired old wife of 30 and a little girl of 7, and the little girl de facto, unknown to anybody, is daddy's real girlfriend. Not that there's any physical relationship, God forbid, but just that she serves that function which mommy once served as being his delightful little playmate, his date. And this can result in tensions between mother and daughter, much of which are unconscious. And the other way around too, when the tired, fat old husband comes home tired from work and has his beer and TV and goes to bed, and there's a delightful little son around, mother finds in the son the substitute for that dashing boyfriend she once had, PB, before babies. Okay, that's just a little
what's
side note.
our source, or authoritative source, for Rivka's being 3 years old?
It's figured out simply by calculations as to when people give birth and get married and die. I don't recall exactly, frankly, but her birth is announced back before. It's in Seder Olam, I think. Not everybody necessarily accepts these things.
He takes his rise right away.
All right, wait 1 second.
And he makes
no,
it right.
Yeah, wait. After. No, it doesn't say when he lives with her. Now, Eliezer says, fine, we have a deal. This is from God. It's wonderful. He brings out presents, and Laban's eager to get the presents. And later the rabbi say he keeps feeling around Yaakov's empty pockets. Where are the presents? Like the previous generation brought. All right. So finally he's ready to go. They try to stall him, just as Laban does later by Yaakov. I would say the family of Avram regards him as a freak. The guy who left this wonderful culture of Nahor, this ancient, beautiful religion of idolatry and highly developed Babylonian civilization, to do this crazy Jewish thing in Israel, like the Dutch soldier who just got killed here in the army. And they're always hoping he's going to come back. So if Avram himself is stubborn and won't come back, all right, at least they hope maybe they'll get Yitzchak out by, she's a little girl, she's not ready to go yet, maybe Yitzchak will come over here. And then they try to get Yaakov to stay later. And Laban even mentions the God of our fathers, Nahor, and so forth. So right away, then Eliezer gets tough. Look, let me go. God wants this, don't delay. He says, well, we have to ask the girl. From the other rabbi, since the Torah mentions this, God wants to give you a hint that the girl should be asked. And against maybe the custom of many places, you cannot take a woman against her will. So the little girl says, I will go. And then she goes and she trots along, and she comes along and she sees a man out there in the field, and Minchah is praying. And what does she do? Before that, she fell off the camel, and covered her face with a veil. Very strange. What is this? Batipol me'alagamal.
They're different.
The simple translation is she fell.
She slid off.
Excuse me, I ask you a question. If she slid off the camel, does the Torah tell us Rivka sat down, and Rivka got up, and Rivka went to bed, and Rivka brushed her teeth? The Torah is not interested in these things. If it's just to tell us physically she got off the camel, so what's the moral message? Why mention it? All right, she slips like, oh, hey, Batipol, instead of, what else could you do? I mean,
Usually the
in the
camel
Middle
wheel,
East.
and then you do.
Well, the camel was in the whole alcohol. Without help, you have to fall.
Right, yeah. I would say it's very
else said he had the man.
Yes, oh, right. Right. It's only after, right. The Torah says she fell off the camel only after, here it is, at the end of chapter 24, 64. Rivka too lifted her eyes, here, let's go back to 63. And Yitzchak went out to meditate in the field at dusk, Mincha, and he lifted up his eyes, again, like Lot lifting up his eyes to look for the highest paid rabbit in the world. And like Avram lifting up his eyes to look for it, yes. So Yitzchak lifts up his eyes, looking for his collar, perhaps. And lo, there were camels coming. And Rivka too lifted up her eyes. And she saw Yitzchak, who she's looking for. And then, Batipol me'alagamal. When she saw him, she slipped down. Before she knows who it is, apparently. And she said to the servant, who is this man who's walking? Who is he? And he said, it's my master. And then she took her veil and covered herself. Now these are two very strange things. The scenario I'm going to tell you is some of ancient ideas and perhaps some of hers put into my own contemporary language. Who is Rivka? Rivka is the daughter of a casino operator in Las Vegas. Rivka comes from a tough place, materially oriented, sensually oriented.
But a kinswoman of Abraham.
Yes, Abraham once flew over the cuckoo nest to offer her out, but the rest were there. So there's this little girl, she may serve as the clerk in the hotel, and somehow she also, her heart beats to a different drummer like Abraham's. And while everybody else is thinking of making a lot of money and power and having a ball in life, she's thinking of chesed, how to do kindness, how to get close to God, how to get close to other people, soul, spirit. She's different. Still, she's a sharp little girl from Las Vegas. She's not going to wear those funny dresses and black stockings and shave her head and do weird things. She's a sharp, modern girl. But somehow she feels there's something higher. Along comes a Mashola from New York, raising money for his yeshiva in Las Vegas. And while he's there, he says, you know what? The Rosh Yeshiva, who's a real tzaddik, has a son. Oh, what's he like? Just like the Rosh Yeshiva, he loves to do kindness and think about God and preach about God. And he's an extraordinary man. He's helpful to his society. Rivka's eyes open up. The little bus tshuva from Las Vegas. This is just what I've been looking for all my life. So, will you go? You've never seen the man. There are no pictures in those days. Will you go? I am going. And she takes the long trip. And as they pull in the taxi into Williamsburg, there's an empty field, garbage dump. In the middle of the field, it's rather late. The chassid couldn't make it to shul, and he's davening. And she suddenly sees this gaunt, lean, otherworldly figure, like straight out of the shtetl, standing there davening in the field. And she has not hunch who this is already. At that moment, she falls off the camel and shot. True, this is exactly what she had been told. She shares all their values, but they're from quite a different world. The little Batshuva girl from Las Vegas and the chassid from Mea Shearim or Williamsburg. Still, they're dedicated to a great mission, and they get married, but there's always going to be different outlooks and communication between them. And the veil is put in front of her face as a sign. There will constantly be a veil between their outlooks. Okay? But they go on to build the house of Israel, to be a major link in that chain leading from Avram to the Mashiach, to bring man back to Eden.
She must have been a very mature child of her age.
Really? A great child. She's one, as I said, who had the old lady and the little girl. A box of kunim.
Very mature girl.
And anyway, so this is the scenario. You have two types of ideal marriage, maybe, tonight. You have a Yaakov Rachel, a merging of kindred spirits of like souls. The children of such a marriage have a certain happiness and harmony. They have things go smooth, their path is clear before them. They are fine, but may not be great. There's another kind of great marriage of opposites, where there's constant clash and tension and lack of mutual understanding, because they come from two opposite spectrums of human outlook. They're built on challenge. And a child from that marriage will have struggle and tension and conflict and pain, but may become greater because that child has to merge opposites, to synthesize everything and put it all together. And so I would say that's the case of Yaakov. Yaakov has daddy one way, mommy another way, grandfather like mommy, the chesed principle, the expansionist, the outreach. Daddy is the opposite, the careful, the exact, the ethical, the deep, the slow, the patient. And those two qualities, chesed and gevura, in Kabbalistic jargon, have to be somehow merged into Tiferes, glory, or emes, truth, by Yaakov. Okay? So, we have them now married, and he's comforted for the loss of Sarah. And then what does Avram do after this great spiritual odyssey with Sarah and nothing great afterwards? Life must still go on. And he takes another wife whose name was Torah, incense, beautiful incense. Some say it's the same as Hagar, who shaped up, who really appreciated Avram's values once she was out of there. And Keturah had a whole bunch of kids with Avram, right? And grandchildren, they made nations. And then Abraham gave all he had to Yitzchak. We're just about finished. Abraham gave all he had to Yitzchak. That's verse 5. Verse 6. But to the concubine's children.
Yeah.
Now here, this may not be Keturah, because it says she was a wife. But to the concubine's children, maybe another women, whom Abraham had, he gave gifts and sent them while alive away from Yitzchak. He understood they must not be together. He now took over Sarah's job, eastward to the land of East. What does that mean? He gave all he had to Yitzchak. So how could he give gifts to the concubines? I could say it means he had given gifts before he gave everything to Yitzchak. He did this. But the simple order of the verses implies he gave everything to Yitzchak. And then somehow he still had something to give to the concubines. How could that be?
But through him by his wisdom. He gave all his wisdom to Isaac, and he gave some.
No, he gave his possessions to Isaac.
Well, essentially, Yitzhak was his heir.
So, yes, so he gave him all he had. So what's left for the concubines?
Essentially,
It doesn't say essentially, it says all. It doesn't say most. So there's some who say like this. It's very nice. There's things which I have, like I said before, and things which I really have. Sometimes, maybe I'm a tzaddik, and I was in Las Vegas on my way out west. While I was there, I figured just for the heck of it, I'll put 50 cents in the slot machine. And out comes $5. All right, $5 is $5. Still, that's not my money. That's not really mine. It's mine legally, but it doesn't fit with me. So everybody has both physical and spiritual possessions which are really theirs, which fit into their whole life pattern, and some aberrations which really don't belong with them. Abraham picked up some dirty money on the way. It was his, nothing illegal, but it was dirty money. Which money? The money he got from Pharaoh, or Abimelech, for taking Sarah. Abraham doesn't want any money from that. But he's got it. He's got to do something with it. Not give it back to them to do terrible things with it. He's got ideas and teachings which he really might rather not have had. While he grew up in Babylonia, as a curious young spiritual gentleman, he picked up all kinds of knowledge of black magic and voodoo and those arts. That's not really the kind of thing Abraham wants to have, or which he wants his son Yitzchak to have. So all that was really his in the spiritual material words he gave to Yitzchak. That other stuff was fit for the children of the concubines who weren't so high. Because even if Avraham Avinu is your father, if your mother is not Sarah, you're not going to make it. Because the woman establishes the essential soul of the person. The father then just trains and develops that soul in its behavior and its relations to the outside world. So he gives them this money that he got from Sarah, and he gives the concubines' kids the black magic, and he sends them east to become the gurus of India, who eventually will turn out to be problems for his descendants in the 1980s. Okay? And then it tells us very simply he died in 175, and it tells us about Yishmael and all his descendants, and Yishmael dying, and that ends our Sedra. We'll just take a brief glance at the Haftorah for like 2-3 minutes on page, well, we don't have the books anyway, so there's no purpose of announcing the page. The Haftorah also deals with deathbed scenes. The life of Sarah, and she died, Avram died, Yishmael died, and David died. David got old like Avram, and he was about to die. And Mendel Hirsch and Professor Leibovitz, who teaches downstairs here on Thursday nights, I think, the two of them both said this is to show contrast. There's the life of one kind of tzaddik like Abraham, who ends with a beautiful family relationship, who ends with a nice relationship with his servants and neighbors and everyone, who dies in peace, basically. Contrasted to King David, who is the model example of a rotten Jewish family. King David is lying there dying amidst entreaties. His son Eliyahu is having parties while Daddy is dying, trying to grab the throne away from Shlomo, to whom his father had promised. But he's the oldest that had been promised to Shlomo. He's got his servants conspiring with Eliyahu against him. You have court intrigues. He's shivering from fright or sickness or old age, David. And they bring him a young virgin, which isn't the nicest thing for the author of Psalms. But he doesn't know her, maybe purposely. But the whole scene we get is one of power corrupts and absolute power so not corrupts. In the process of being a king, and a great king, and a holy king, and writing Psalms and all the things he does, he loses his family. With the exception of Shlomo, his family is really terrible. He winds up basically killing his sons, and the sons trying to kill him, and plots and intrigues. And his final commands to Shlomo are Pisol Cheshbonot, as Leibowitz puts it, to settle his accounts and scores with those who might cause trouble for Shlomo later on. Still, once he appoints Shlomo, Bathsheba says, you've now entered eternity. Only through the appointment of Shlomo could David's spirit continue, just as only through Yitzchak could the spirit of Abraham continue, and just as Abraham had to send the sons of the Pelagshim eastward so they don't interfere with his mission, so David had to clear away all the people who could interfere with Shlomo's mission. This strange role of Abishag HaShunamite is a hard one to figure out. And who could think of a Jewish king suddenly taking a woman to use as something to warm him up? Ibn Ezra says it's because Mephish.
Well, he didn't request it.
No, he took it. So the Ibn Ezra says that he's sick. What can you do? He can die. He's shivering.
He was there going to put her that water.
The problem is,
Instead of a water bottle.
yeah, the problem is,
There were no water bottles.
the problem is that the Talmud says if a man is sick and dying, he says the only way I'll somehow survive is if I even look at a woman. No, we don't allow promiscuity, even if it's to save lives. It's one of the three realms you die for.
Well, they get married.
This is the problem. So according to the Talmud discusses this whole matter, as I recollect in Sanhedrin 22 approximately, and what she says to him in effect is, marry me, Abishag HaShunamite. And David says, I can't marry you, because I already have 18 wives. And a king is limited to 18 wives. I take her for a concubine? Apparently she didn't like that. So he had many concubines, but he could not make her a wife. There's another solution. He could divorce one. So the Talmud says, you see how terrible divorce is. And even David, who was in an emergency situation, they could marry this beautiful young girl, but he would never do it at the expense of hurting anyone else. Maybe after he had taken Bathsheba by hurting Uriah, he never again wanted to have his pleasure at someone else's expense. So he wouldn't divorce, so he could not sleep with her. And some say, yes, it was Asur, but David sort of felt this was a situation beyond the usual law. And he specifically had her there to give him temptation which he would conquer. So that he would no longer succumb as he had preemptorily done by Bathsheba. Now, it gets a little thicker in the plot. The Talmud tells a strange story. So he had no relations with her. She was lying there trying to warm him up. Beautiful woman, but no relations. And she says, you know what, David? You can't. She taunted him. You can't have sex anymore. You're an old man. You're worn out. And David says, I will show you. And David calls in Bathsheba. She answers the moon of this story. And when he calls her, he has relations with Bathsheba, who at this point is older and certainly not as appealing. And if a man were weak, it wouldn't be as easy to have relations with her. 13 times, the Talmud says. And he says, see, I'll show you. Now, this is a most strange story. It does explain, as most of these Talmudic stories, strange things in the text. We read our Haftarah at the beginning, and King David was old, he came into his old age, Baba Yamin, the same thing as by Avram, and they covered him with clothes, but he wasn't warm. Some say it's because he once tore Saul's clothes. He didn't treat clothes with sufficient respect. So, and his servant said, seek for my lord a virgin, and so forth. And they saw a beautiful young girl found Abishag, and she was very beautiful. She was a woman to the king. She ministered to him. But he did not know her intimately. And then Yosef, the king, and Natan the prophet, who had predicted Shlomo's reign, tells Bathsheba, look, I can't do this alone. We both got to put pressure on the king, or Adonai is going to kill you and your son, and there go the hopes for the continuation of David's regime, and so forth. So Bathsheba goes in, coached by Natan. The king was very old. And Abishai the Shunammite ministered to the king. That's a superfluous phrase. We already know he was very old. We already know Abishai was ministering. So apparently, there's a connection here between Abishai's conduct and that of Bathsheba. And Bathsheba bowed her head and prostrated herself and said, "What is your wish?" And she said to him, "Please, Solomon's supposed to reign, and God be the always here, he's making parties," and so forth. She tells him the whole story. The prophet comes in and confirms it. And then after the prophet comes in, King David says, "Call Bathsheba to me." Now she was already there. All right? All right, he says she went out when nothing came in, and she came before the king and stood before the king. We don't need all this. Just say, "Call Bathsheba and deliver the message." And he said, "I swear as God lives, surely Solomon your son shall reign after me and sit in my throne in my stead. Surely so will I do this day." And Bathsheba bowed her face to the earth and prostrated herself to the king and said, "Let my lord King David live forever." So we have these extra phrases that she stood before him and said, "Call her in," not just that she came back normally, and then the fact that it mentions Abishai when she comes in the first time, which we already know about. So I think the Talmud, again, their story is hinted at in all these things, that Abishai is related to Bathsheba's coming in, and Abishai is there just serving him, nothing else, and she taunts him about his lack of sexual ability. And I would say that Abishai is the real hidden heroine of this story. What's the purpose of this whole haftarah of this story? To somehow, when he's old and cold and worn out and maybe lying in bed all day, to somehow get David to do one last act of great strength and to take charge again as David should be. Just as Abram did nothing great after Sarah's death, David is apparently now beyond doing things. And there's 3 people involved in the scheme, from what I recall of the commentaries. Natan, Bathsheba, and Abishai. Natan and Bathsheba appraised David of the situation and appealed to his mercies. But someone has to stir David out of his lethargy and apathy and maybe depression. The one who does that is Abishai. First, she tries to do it just by being his beautiful young servant girl. It doesn't work. Then she tries the opposite. She teases him, "You, David, king of Israel, you can't have sexual relations with me." And that teasing somehow makes him once more have a brief flash of energy and vitality and fire before the fire goes out. And he sleeps with his old wife Bathsheba. And while he's so worked up in energy and activity, working on adrenaline, he also disposes of the whole matter of Solomon and sees that Solomon is properly crowned, which in my opinion is the whole purpose, according to the Talmud, of what Abishai the Shunammite, our great heroine, is doing. And sometimes that's the tactics you have to use with someone. Someone says, "I don't feel tired, just leave me lie in bed." "What kind of bum are you? You can't get out of bed?" Like the wife who's yelling at him, maybe doing it out of love to stir him out of this state so that he can do what he has to do before he goes. And now it's time for us to go.
Yes, we go.
Anyone who didn't get last week's sheet?